So welcome everybody, and if you've just joined us, please type into the chat the discipline area that you teach, and it would be nice to know what institute you're from as well. So it's lovely to have people from IT Sligo and Annette Kenny here with us as well in GMIT this morning. So if you haven't met us before, Annette Cosgrove, who works with us in teaching and learning and who's a lecturer in computing, and myself, Carina Ginty, from the Teaching and Learning Office. So you're very welcome. Over the next hour, we will be discussing options for alternative assessment, but we also want to hear from you, because I'm sure there's particular challenges you're facing this term in relation to your assessment strategy for any module that you're teaching. So this is, I suppose, this clinic session is about chatting through issues that are coming up or tips or advice that you need. We're going to be pointing to some lovely resources as well in the chat. So you'll see us throughout. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be pointing to particular resources that may help. Some you may be familiar with already, others maybe not so much. Okay, so we'll kick off, Annette, will we?
Yes, that's perfect. And again, like that, I'd like to share later on some of the practices that we've used ourselves, and also ones that we have a very good document from DCU. It's just being in the process of being written at the moment, and it shares practice in various disciplines. So you'll find that very useful, and I'm going to share those links with you on the chat. So again, along with the discussion here today, there'll be an awful lot of resources that you can take from this session and maybe review them yourself in your own time. Okay, so thanks, Carina.
Thanks for that. So we'll have a little bit of chat. We'll have a chat about online assessment considerations. First of all, we are curious to know what type of assessments you're using. So we're going to get you to share on a Padlet board in a moment. If there is a particular question that's burning you, and that's why you're here for this session this morning, by all means, type it in the chat now so that we can be thinking about how to help you and that everybody has visibility of what that issue might be. So please do that. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some alternative options, and as Annette said, some examples, some from that lovely DCU document that's just in development at the moment. So I think the first thing, sorry, I just need to click something up here. It's saying I need to dismiss it. It's coming up. The first thing just to talk through with everybody around alternative online assessment, and I think we need to be clear that it's not a lesser form of assessment, but it is a different assessment to achieve the same aim. And many would argue, and certainly as we've delved through the literature in this area and worked with colleagues in the sector over the last year in response to COVID, we're actually seeing kind of a higher level learning that's been gained from online assessment and alternative assessment when it actually is designed correctly. So it's all about the design and the questions that are asked and posed to the learners. So you do get deeper learning from online assessment than you would get from a traditional memory test in an exam hall. Okay, so just to be aware of that. So when we're planning for online assessment, and as you know, that is the agenda for this semester. Once again, we're looking at all online assessment, unless of course some have some proctoring requests. I can certainly talk to you about proctoring and the experiences we've had with that. We did a case study in the School of Business on that, and we can talk about that shortly as well. But for you, looking at your modules, the key is looking at reviewing the learning outcomes at this stage and checking for alignment. And now I'd say at this stage, you've all gone through the QA processes within your departments, within your schools to I suppose, get feedback on the assessment plan, but you may not have finalised that yet. But so here's the opportunity, looking at the learning outcomes, checking for over-assessment, checking for alignment, which is key. So also what you're trying to do with online assessment is you need to ensure that there's clear instructions on all aspects of the operation and completion of the online assessment. So you'll see when you get an opportunity to engage perhaps with one of our AMA clinics, with one of our learning technologists, they go through a lot of detail on the setup and how it's so important to have all aspects of it set up in a way that is clear to the students, and also takes away a headache for you as well. Students should be informed of any changes to assessment methods. You're aware of that. An alternative assessment should require an equivalent effort on the part of the student. So estimated, for example, by the student effort, hours on the assessment task, the length of time, or perhaps the word count. Okay. Another few points to consider, academic integrity can be a big issue where, you know, it's a hot topic at the moment, and it's great to see there's lots of different groups around the country working on guidance and resources on that. There is a work group actually in GMIT also. Now we have developed 2 academic integrity type resources to help students and staff that just became available before Christmas, and we'll point you to that. And I wanted to make you aware of as well, we haven't publicised it as such, but I suppose we're telling people who come into the online assessment clinics, we have been given access to a new online course for staff on academic integrity, and it is available on GMIT Learn Online. You can access it under the Teaching and Learning Office link. It's called, I think it's called Academic Integrity. I'll just check that name again before we finish today. So you may want to do that for your own self at some stage if you're worried about any concerns around academic integrity. I suppose that the common things that we recommend is around the MCQ design is key, you know, and having timed or time constrained exams within that Moodle environment, having, you know, a consent, a declaration that they have to, and that's set up within Urkent. You can also ask for reflective tasks, which asks students to explain their answers in more detail. And we'll talk about that in a moment. There's kind of some probing examples that can be built into your online assessment. Other things to be aware of there. Did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes, yeah, Carina, I'll just come in for a moment. Now, Carina has a very good document that basically goes into this in a lot more detail. But just in my own personal experience, we use a lot of MCQs in the computing department. And I think, I suppose the secret to success with them is to plan them properly and to ensure that, like traditionally people were just using multiple choice, one question type. So it's very important what we've, I suppose, through these assessment clinics and all of the information that has been shared over the past year, I suppose, is, you know, the importance of planning it, using different question types, being able to randomize questions, watching the timing on questions. Particularly some people here do maths and computing, you know, randomizing even the, not just the numbering of the questions, but also the value within the question, you know, so all of those lead to a very robust MCQ, and, you know, almost as you can be as happy giving it as maybe a written exam, you know. So again, more and more people are starting, I suppose, using the MCQ to, and we have very good AME clinics that it will help people to design it themselves. Again, some in my own situation, I break mine into section A and section B, my MCQs, and section A is where they're multiple choice. I give lots of different types of questions, but in my section B, then mine are open-ended and I get them to actually type in some part of an answer. And again, some lecturers say, oh, but do I have to correct that then? But it's, you know, if you have a good rubric built into Moodle, you'll only be minutes correcting it, you know. So I have very big groups myself, 150, 130, and I find that this works really well. And it also allows the good students to shine and to share their practice. And again, I always use it in a safe browser, you know, so that they can't be opening up other browsers and copying and pasting it easily. So I think just, I suppose we have a very good document there, which gives all of the tips, and I'll be sharing it later on. MCQ, I mean, Moodle quiz, yes. A Moodle quiz with different types of questions, Rita, yes. So, and again, we have some excellent examples, question banks that we can share with you. But again, in general, just a lot of people have started off doing very, you know, basic, and even in computing department, they come back and they say, you know, one person, the results were way too high, you know. So you should never give the feedback, you know, never give the students results straight away. Always use deferred feedback, you know, just in case there's a mistake on it, it just saves you. Safe browser is a setting within the Moodle quiz. Okay, so I can show you that at the end. So again, we've always used safe browser in the computing department because it stops them, you know, alt and tabbing between different screens, you know. So again, just a few little tips, and we have some documents to support these. So I just wanted to come in there, Carina, to share my own
that's
experience
brilliant
in the competition department. So thank you.
Thanks a million, Annette. And I'm glad you brought up the point about rubrics, because it's something that we're constantly promoting and encouraging colleagues to engage with the design of good rubrics. They can be built in within the Moodle environment, but equally you can have rubrics designed for any assessment. And I know they're commonly used across the Institute, but just to be careful in relation to the design of the rubric. And I do run another session that looks at rubrics and how we build rubrics. It follows on from a learning outcome session that we offer in TLO. So maybe have a look out for that again if you need support in actually putting together a rubric which looks under various different grading categories. Okay, so what else do we have here? We'd love to know what type of assessments you're using at the moment. Would you mind clicking on that link? Now that should copy over, shouldn't it? Sorry. Yeah. I'll put it into the browser here.
It actually works.
Will it work?
I think so, wouldn't it?
If everyone clicks on it, can you click on the link?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So, right, just click on the plus sign on the right corner, and could you just type in, we're just curious, we want to know what type of assessments you're using at the moment. I've put a link in the browser there as well, or in the chat. And I'll just pull up that page, Annette, because I have it live in the background here.
Yes, lovely.
Okay. Sorry. 1 second. So everybody's having, I can see people adding to it now. Give me 1 second. I just changed the screen. Stop. And okay, so am I sharing the Padlet? Yep.
Yes, the Padlet is being updated there.
So we have a couple of items that that were added earlier from the previous session. But let's see, very common, the MCQs, online presentations. Okay, what else do we have? Moodle quizzes.
Just, Carina, just something I would like to share just on the online presentations is what I find is with our groups in our past, and this is, I'm sure anyone who has done it had the same issues. You know, we had broadband and technical issues. So, you know, where we had maybe 20 to present in a 2-hour slot, or 10 to present in a 2-hour slot. Often if you ask them to do a pre-recording beforehand and to share their pre-recording, and then you ask them questions, you know, so it just takes the technical glitches out of it. So, for example, if I'm presenting for Carina today, I have already prepared my showcase, and so it's live, but it's a pre-prepared version, and I found that worked really well, and it reduced hours from the presentation. So they can't just submit it; they must present the recording. But it does save any technical glitches, and particularly those people who are concerned and stressed about broadband in a live scenario. So it's a good, you know, for people who can't do it. You know, a lot of people don't have their broadband good enough to do live. So I think to provide them with the option to have a pre-recording, but they must also share the pre-recording. So you know, it's not an option instead of doing a presentation. It's just an addition to. So just to add that to it, just.
I like that idea, the elevator pitch and forums for reflection journal. I assume is the reflection journal an online reflection tool that's been used, or was that one that was up there earlier? Maybe. Okay, so we're getting the general idea there. Moodle is being used. MCQs seem to be very popular, but it's nice to see some other alternatives being used. And this resource that we have, I'll just come out of this now again, Annette. I'll just come back in. The resource that we have, this actual resource or notes that we're going through, has lots of alternative options as well that you can browse through, and we'll share that with you in the chat, a copy of this as we're moving along. Okay, so anybody want to come in there to share? I really liked that example about the which one was it? Not the portfolios, the
reflective journal.
The reflective journal, who's using reflective journals? And how are you using them?
Hello, it's Mairead here.
Hi Mairead, how's it going?
Great. I'm fairly new here with the GMIT in Mayo, so I'm doing the entrepreneurship and business communications and negotiations modules and that. But some of the assessments that I have this term is the reflective journal and elevator pitches and the group presentations. But the reflective journal I find is great because after the lectures we do online seminars and we work through the workshops, but then they have to write down what they thought beforehand and then what they learned and what they learn in the future. And I've given them 10% marks overall for 5 journals. So they've completed 2 already, and the feedback from it, they say that they're actually learning something now from it, you know, when before they were just rushing through it and not actually pausing to think.
Yeah, very good. And Mairead, is it just 5% or 10% you give for the journal contributions?
10% overall, so for each journal it's 2%.
Okay, and how many journal entries do they do?
So only 5 journal entries.
Okay, and then what other, is this a 5 credit module, Mairead?
So this is a 30 credit module.
Oh, it's 30 credits. Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, I get you.
So the elevator pitch and the group presentation, they're 30 each. And then I have attendance as well, which is 10%. And okay. I find the attendance is great because it actually makes them come to the live seminars, because there's nothing worse than having nobody or only a few in the class. So I have about 30 in all the classes, and it's like nearly full all the time, which is great because they're conscious of the attendance.
Yeah, the participation. As I suppose when we pitch, when we look at assessing learners, you know, under the area of participation, we would say more so than saying attendance. We wouldn't give students marks for attendance, but certainly the participation in those fabulous active learning workshops that you're running is key to their learning and development. And that's the message to them. So tell me, Mairead, do you use the Moodle tools? Do you use a database tool for your reflective journals, or do you using OneNote? Or
I use the Moodle tool, so it's very easy. So at the start, they were, when they open it in Moodle, they don't seem to know whether it's uploaded or not. So a lot of them are coming back to me to say, has it gone up? And it does automatically. So once they start their journal in Moodle, it automatically goes up then.
Brilliant.
You know, so it's great.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Fabulous.
Thanks a lot. Another question, just somebody asked, how do you mark it?
So I have a rubric for the journal, and it's great because I have all the points laid out on the rubric. So I can share it here if you want. Somehow I'll when you're talking, I'll see if I can share a link to it. But it's great because they know exactly then how to have the critical thinking side of it, or whether it's just reflective or, you know, a basic one. So they all try and get the top marks, and they go by the rubric, which is great because they write more.
Very good. That's great. Thanks, Mairead. Yep. And I'll just go back in here to the notes that I was sharing.
Yeah, I'm just snipping a tool. I'm just taking a screenshot for somebody here now from.
You know, I don't have access to the attach mode in the chat there. I can't upload any files for anybody. Can you, Annette?
Let me see now. I can just do links, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't allow for any file attachments or apps. We can't even do forms. This happened to me last week as well. When I was
I can't either, no.
Yeah, I must check that with Jessica because that happened last week. All right, so sorry, we'll just move along here. So thanks a million for sharing. If anybody else wants to come in there, by all means. The other thing we wanted to say around strategies, assessment strategies, and maybe colleagues might want to share their experiences on this also, how they've moved from the traditional exams to the online assessment. And I think it's important to note online assessments enable us to move from the lower order of Bloom's taxonomy right up to the higher level. Because when we look at the traditional exam environment, where some of you may be more used to, it really is only looking at knowledge and comprehension, so remembering and understanding. That's the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy, the learning domains. Whereas when we look at online assessment, we're going to a much higher level. So it's about application, applying an analysis, and then synthesis of ideas also. So it can be more challenging for students, and we can argue, is it more authentic? Yes, it is. You know, we see some good examples there, even what Mairead said about her reflection journal, and Annette has mentioned a few examples as well. Like, certainly when I take our level 9 Masters in Teaching and Learning, our cert and our diploma in Teaching and Learning program, we would have, there is no traditional exam where there's a memory test at all. All the students, which are staff here in the Institute or external colleagues who work in higher education, they do such a variety of online assessments, and they're all linked back to rubrics and reflective tasks and building an e-portfolio of evidence and working collaboratively with your peers and peer observing and creating digital learning objects. So it's all about applying an analysis. Yes, we have to remember and have knowledge on facts and figures, but if we can't apply it and reflect on what we've learned, you know, we're not really getting into the deep side of learning. So I think we've a lot to learn on how we conduct and deliver our master's programs, how we can bring some of those ideas into our undergrad programs as well, and not to be afraid of it. Okay, so we want things to be real world, and we want students, they need to be able to apply it. So that's the key, and we're trying to do that when we offer alternative assessments and online assessments. And we want to see a move away from to traditional exams where they're not needed. Now, it's very much recognised that for professional qualifications, and we've seen it with some of the professional bodies, that they're insisting or requiring, you know, proctored exams for memory tests. And, you know, there is an argument for that in some cases, but there's also a bigger case to be made for the alternative approach and the deeper learning that is gained. So as we mentioned, open book is probably the most popular that's been used this year and across higher education. We put together in TLO, one of our learning technologists put together a very nice open book guide. We might share that in the chat, Annette. I have a link to it. I'll do it in a moment. Yep. And it really is end-to-end on how to set up your open book exam within the Moodle environment in GMIT. I'm sure it would apply to IT Sligo as well. It's the same. So happy to share that with you. And
Carina, can I just stop you there, because Kevin has a question, or Gabriel has a question.
Gabriel, yeah?
Yeah. Thanks, Annette and Carina. Yeah, I was just wondering that one of my exams would normally be a final exam worth 50%. And I'm thinking of changing that to CA-based exams. But can it be divided up into 2 CA exams, or would it still have to be one final exam, but kind of CA type? So what I'm thinking is doing a 25% practical exam online, maybe the end of April, and then maybe doing an assignment or a report worth the other 25%.
And are they going to be linked, Gabriel? Is one, you know, is it more like a reflective report that links back to that practical demonstration that you're asking them to do?
Yeah, so we use software and they could build the network, but then maybe on the report they could look at emergent technology or something in relation to that. It's networking technology is the subject. So I could do a practical based, and then maybe
you could present it to them as one, you know, one big assessment, you know, an assessment package, and say there's 2 parts to this. One will be demonstrate the linkage between the 2. That would be important for the learners, so they don't see them in isolation, that they see one will benefit the other and one links to the other. So the demonstration comes first, I assume, is it, Gabriel? And then they're working in the background on developing the literature and the analysis of the workings.
Like what I was just wondering is it acceptable, would say, that I would give them maybe the month to do the research on the emergent technology, because they would need a few weeks anyway to do that, and then carry out the practical assessment then at the end of April or sometime in May.
Absolutely.
So that's okay then. So that
perfect. It's a great
Perfect.
idea.
And Carina, if I can just come in there as well, Kevin, like
Yeah.
a lot of lecturers they've had to take a 50% exam and split it into 2 assessments. So that's what a lot of people have been doing.
Okay.
And maybe, let's say even my own module, I broke it into a 20% MCQ and a 30% project, you know. So again, my main aim was to ensure that all the learning outcomes that the exam was to ensure all the learning outcomes were met. That was the most important thing for an external examiner. So, for example, if they were, my exam was to ensure that they learned code or they did X, Y, and Z. You know, I had 3 learning outcomes or 5 learning outcomes to be measured with the exam. I ensured that they matched the 2 assessments, and that's the most important thing from an external examiner viewpoint. Is if you do change your strategy, you need to say, well, I'm not doing the exam, but the same learning outcomes now are now applied. I'm asking some questions here in the MCQ, and then I'm giving them the practical. So it's, you know, to match and just to follow on from what Carina said there.
Also, Gabriel, just thinking of learning outcomes, they've obviously done some other assessments for you. So just be careful you're not over-assessing. So thinking about the report and the questions you're asking them to look at in the report, that you're not repeating perhaps something you asked them to do earlier in the year, because that's just an example of over-assessing then, you know. Is this a 5 or a 10 credit module, Gabriel?
5.
5, okay. So what did they do already this year?
They would have had, before the Christmas, they had a practical, we were allowed into labs at that point, and we did a practical exam.
Okay.
So, yeah, and
Okay,
they had
that's
lab reports.
I'm just concerned that they're not being over-assessed. So that seems very balanced. You have the report, you have your demonstration, they're going to be researching, they're going to be synthesizing ideas, reflecting, you know, it seems like you're getting all your learning outcomes there. So
Great. And just one final point on that. Normally I would have had to create an exam paper that would have been submitted to Guru, which I've never done this procedure because I'm relatively new to GMIT. But would the CAs still need to be done in a way that it's submitted to Guru then, or is it a different, or is it just that we let go, you don't do the Guru process?
You don't have to use Guru at all, but what you can do, Gabriel, my understanding is that your external examiner, you can give them guest access to your Moodle page, and you can show and demonstrate to them the tool that you've set up, or the assessment. I don't think you have to go back uploading that to Guru, because it's not a proctored as such traditional exam. You're going with alternative assessments. So unless it's been a requirement, check with the registrar's documentation that came out. I don't believe they've asked for CA briefs. Have they, Annette?
No, what ours have done is we've had to put any assessment, all our assessments into a folder to share with the extern. So I think every program board has their own, I suppose, process maybe, and whatever works for them. Jean also asked, do you have to get the program board approval for these changes? So again, formally, Carina, I don't know what the formal line from the registrar is, but in general, you would discuss with the program board. We would discuss more that they wouldn't have too many of the one type, or that we always discuss in relation to the timing as well of it, so that they wouldn't have, say, for example, 2 assessments on the one day, or, you know, so we have a shared document and in our computing program. But again, I don't know if there's an actual line from, formal.
Now I'm just looking. Michael Hannon, our registrar, sent out a document on Monday, which has an update. I'm just looking back on the emails that were sent. We might pull up that document. Did you see that email that went out? It was an update on our kind of LTA framework and dealing with online exams and online assessments. The procedures are in there. So was it that on Monday, that document, Annette? We'll find it.
Yes, I think so. Actually, no, I didn't look at it in any detail.
It's in the or maybe it came out yesterday. So there was a link there from Michael. Gabriel, if you need to double check, if it has to be, like, if you had to submit something via Guru, you really would only be just giving a description or a guideline as to exactly what you've told us you're going to do, part A and part B. Ideally, if your external examiner, is in contact with you, you can give them guest access. There is a way of getting guest access within Moodle for that external examiner if you want to show them your folders and talk them through what you're doing. But I'd look at the procedure that Michael sent out, and we'll put it in the chat because I know there's a link to it in the registrar's office.
Thank you.
Carina, there's just a question there from Joan is just saying, what can she do as an alternative to lab practical? Is there any in case we cannot get back into college? So she's just looking for ideas from maybe other colleagues here. That have practicals. I personally don't have, I don't have science lab practicals, but somebody may like to share some. And I also have a document I'm going to share in a few moments, and it has some good examples. I'll share it.
It's for medical science, is it?
Yeah. I'm just last term we were able to get in all right, to do the labs, but now we're kind of in a situation where, I'm just kind of looking ahead at my.
And what about, what about doing some reflective tasks and maybe looking at real life case studies in light of what's going on with COVID? I'm thinking of some hot topics or case studies, medical science.
Case studies,
Are they using the e-portfolio, Joan? I know you're trialing it with the group.
Yeah, we're doing that all right in third year, but this is now for second years that, we would have this term or whatever in histology. I'm just wondering what I can do, I would have, got them into almost like a skills test and, so that they perform a stain or whatever procedure and we mark them on that. But I'm just looking at that now and they haven't even gotten in. We've been trying to kind of work through lab simulations and stuff like that for, to replace kind of labs at the minute. But I'm just wondering how long I can go with that and wondering and looking ahead then to get those marks then, based on the assessment strategy that I have. But it's great to hear everybody kind of talking about, kind of generating alternative strategies maybe or breaking it down into other things. But I'm just, another thing I'd be kind of concerned with is, students don't like to be told that something is different now, like I'm just getting that feel from them this year, so I'd kind of, we're a good few weeks now into term or whatever, and I'm just wondering, have other people have had that experience, if you change and say, well, okay, there was 10% going for a lab skills test, but now I'm going to have to break that down into, having two different assignments maybe, or two different, I don't know, workshops or something. I don't know.
Don't get carried away on the over-assessment at all. Like, first of all, the skills lab was a practical activity, or the skills. So that was linked to real time in a lab, as part of their engagement with the course. So think about what you have already in place as the assessment strategy, and remember the learning outcomes. There's probably a learning outcome that cannot be met here because they have not got in to do the skills aspect of their course. Am I correct?
You are correct, yeah. And like it is a bit of a worry because we're an accredited course and that, and we'll go on placement next year, so
I believe there's going to be accommodation made for the students to get access to those practicals. Am I correct in more of maybe a compressed version of those lab activities at a later date before they commence those placements? Is that been talked about within your school?
Well, it has, but nothing definite. We're kind of left wondering if that's going ahead or can it go ahead or how do we do it. So we're kind of looking at, we've been on this, we were hoping to get back in on March the 8th to start labs, so we've been kind of working with online tools and stuff. And some of it has been really good. Like you kind of delve deeper and you kind of, I'm working with a virtual microscope the last few weeks and I think it's brilliant now.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And just to come in there, that sounds brilliant. But just to come in there, like, the School of Medicine, they all use all MCQ all of the time. So for their examination. So really, say if you were to take something, maybe you could apply an MCQ to what they've learned, So just in relation to that, you could say, what, when you were using a microscope, what are the 3 elements you should test? So they're demonstrating that they've watched you, so I do think that, you could do an alternative. I know it may take a little bit of work, but there may be examples. A lot of books have sample MCQs, a lot of, if you look online, there's an awful lot of textbooks that come with MCQs, really good, well-designed MCQs. Now, you might have to buy the textbook, might be like €20, but with that, then you get this excellent set of MCQs. So I heard some of the science
import them into Moodle directly.
Import them, so just to think about that, because skills, you know, see, even in programming, where you can't actually do an exam, but you know, you can give them an MCQ, because you can get them to fill in blanks and it'll show that they're programming, you know, whereas yes, it'd be much better if they could, you know, apply and it may not suit to get them to program, you know, offline or whatever they might have the software. So everybody, I suppose, has to rethink the way they're doing it. But just, I always think that's interesting that a lot of the School of Medicine, it's all MCQs. So, you know, how do they do it? If you know what I mean? So sometimes if we just ask the questions, you know, so if they're using the microscope online, you know, maybe what 3 things do you check before you use your microscope, or what?
Look, I will have to do that. I mean, I had that kind of set out all right, that, you know, they were going to have a Moodle based exam, you know, but like usually we would also we would have had this kind of skills test where they come in, they've been, you know, doing the various stains or whatever, and so on and so on, and test for that, you know, because it is a big part of, you know, what medical scientists do. They have to get the practical aspects of it, but just now when we're really kind of faced into, well, we can't really bring them in, you know, it's a huge worry, like, so.
Yes, and Kevin has a good point there in the chat. You know, is there a virtual assessment type that you could do for these labs? So I know that the School of Nursing has in Castlebar have some software for virtual, you know, for so maybe there is, now it could be quite expensive, but maybe it's already available and maybe it's in the science school, you know, maybe that's something you could look at as well.
Okay, thanks very much, folks. That's great.
Okay, but I've just gone there, I'm just posting in the chat, is the document from Michael Hannon that he sent out around guidelines. So for summer exams, terminal exams. So to check the procedures and what's been agreed, you know, through the registrar and through academic council, just if anybody wants to check. I know the question about Guru came up. So anyway, so moving on,
just before we move on, Marilla has just a great suggestion there for Joan. Thanks, Marilla. Just to do an incorrect recorded demo and for them to point out what you did wrong.
That's fantastic. So, I'm just looking at that there, Marilla. Thanks very much for sharing. That's great. Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Is there any more in the chat that we're missing?
What about an oral examination on an assigned practical, Joan? That's very good as well. That's from Mary.
Thanks a million, Mary. Brilliant ideas. I'm so glad I came. Thank you.
Annette, just can I come in here for one moment?
Yes.
It's Mary and
yes, hi Mary.
You talk a lot about MCQs, and I suppose we were kind of moving towards that kind of assessment. I've done quite a lot of them this year, but I'm finding, you know, what time frame should we be giving students to answer questions, as I will be thinking to prevent collusion. And I know there's all the way of randomly, you know, generating the answers within the question and randomly assigning the, you know, the questions as they come and, you know, to the student. But I suppose, you know, with experience, I still find that, you know, there's, you know, kind of like, what's a good time frame for these types of exams, and how many questions, you know? You see some students could do it very quickly, and then others are taking a lot longer. Then you're wondering, are they looking up the answers?
No, that is a big and it's a big, I suppose, question. It depends on your subject topic. So there's no real quick answer to that, because let's say if you're doing a maths and they're complicated maths, it might take 20 minutes to do one maths question and then you put up the answer, you know. So that's, you know, so maybe 10 questions in that would take an hour, you know. So it's very difficult to put a time frame on it. But I do know, Mary, that some of them, some of the students, I'm just even hearing feedback through other schools, or is that there's too many questions and they can't even think, you know. So it's taken the whole learning. There's too many questions to do. So I think some people are actually given too many questions, and the students aren't, you know, they're not passing because they can't get to the questions, you know. So that would be a very important. So I always think it's very good for you as a lecturer, or me as a lecturer, to take the exam or myself in that time. and see how you feel about it. And I give this example, just so somebody was saying that the students, they're really good students, didn't pass. And we just talked about it, and it turned out that a lot of them didn't get past question 15, and she'd put up like, I think, 42 questions. So the point is, I think a really good test is to either get somebody, a colleague or yourself, and you try and do the questions in the time. And I think that's the best time to be a user on your own. And what we do in computing is I'll ask someone else to do mine and they'll ask me. We've always, over the years, always tested for a number of different reasons. Just even in the beginning, the Moodle quizzes weren't that robust. So just to ensure that there was no problems, we always got somebody else to run it. So I think the best I suppose, advice is there is no set. 1 hour is great. I think nowadays we need to give students that it's open for say 2 or 3 hours, because some of them cannot access it at the same time. So that's an important point, to open it, at 2 different times, because a lot of them are working during the day or they don't have access. So is to make it available for a long period of time. But once I start it, then I only have an hour to do it, and the randomize, always use a question bank, never have the same questions, So if I'm talking to you online, Mary, you're saying, oh, well, I'm getting such a question, and I'm saying, oh, but mine's different, So that's one of the most important things, is to ensure that they can't chat to each other, because they're all on the phone to each other, while they're doing it.
Do you think is it fair to do sequential, that they don't have a chance to go back? I sometimes do sequential in my MCQs, where they have to answer the question in front of them and then keep moving forward and not go back.
Well, the thing is, I suppose the question is, if you were a student, would that suit you? So I myself have 2 guys in college here, and they're in NUIG, but I can see the stresses that for a student not to be able to go back a question. I think that, myself, we always let them go forward and back in my MCQ. But again, sometimes we're all afraid of them copying. But, a lot of what my own experience is, they don't have time. If they're given an hour slot and, they have maths to calculate, or, they don't really have time to be talking to each other. They might check answers with each other, but they haven't really. And the rough work is a very good one, folks, always. So let's say to get them to upload rough work of a maths, so you can't just get a maths question, right? To take a picture, use the Office scan, always have to pop up your rough work. Because that then shows also that they worked it out, So some require, in addition to an MCQ, some rough work. So I think that might be a good idea as well for anyone who's mathematical. So I don't know, Mary, if I've answered your question directly.
That's actually quite good, because last year I ran a kind of like a problem-solving exam for we'll say, one of my modules, and it was again MCQ based, but they had to solve the problem to get the answer. So I think, it was kind of going back and forth, and they had only 6 questions to do, and they had probably maybe an hour to do it. And I just found that there was quite a lot of them getting all, we'll say, 100%. Now that's no problem with me as well. Like, I don't, it was open book and they should be able to work through the problem. But I found the grade was quite high for some of the weak students. And I think if I had asked them to upload the rough work to see how they solved the problem, probably would be a different. But then how do you say, well, you still got it right, but you picked the right answer. It's still right, theoretically, but the rough work there would support your answer, which is a very good point, Annette, I think.
Yeah, well, you see, Sarah, you could just give marks for rough work, so 20% for rough work. So you get 80% if you get all right, but you add the 20%, and then you differentiate the people that did it or didn't do it. I suppose that's just it's a workaround, but it also allows us to ensure. I always leave a question, an open-ended question, where I can differentiate my very good students from those who are just chancing it, So I always think it's very important to maybe 2 or 3 open, where you actually have to type, or you have to demonstrate your knowledge in some area, or solve a case study, or, identify what's wrong with the video or something like that, to demonstrate, where you can't actually copy. And I think it's very, that's important.
Yeah, thank you. That's excellent. That's excellent. Thank you.
And that comes under the top tip, the area that we say around asking probing questions, Mary. So it's key to the design of the assessment to have those probing questions, reflective tasks, or getting them to upload, as Annette says, the rough work. So what we always provide to the students, don't forget, always give them the link to the Microsoft Lens app if they're using that to scan those answers, and providing a space that they can submit that in their online assessment. Getting students to explain, you can also get them to explain it within a text box, comment box within the MCQ. So anyways, so no, they're great tips.
Hi.
So other examples where you might probe a question, you know, probing what is most important, which method is best, why is that method best, how would you design X, Y, or Z? So you're getting them to give some commentary in addition to that quantitative tasks that you got them to work out as well. So that's important. Okay, is there anything more there, Annette, or any more questions coming through there?
Yes, well, Rita was just saying if you have a question bank, so do they all carry equal marks and to work properly? So you often mix short questions with long. So again, the question bank is really nice, and you have to create the quiz from the question bank, you know. So generally I put mine into different categories, and I make sure that my question bank pulls a question from each category. So my quiz. So again, I was just saying, if you go to one of the AMA clinics, maybe with one of the learning technologists, they would sit with you and do the setup and help you set up your quiz. Doing that, Rita. So yes, you can combine, you know, the different, you can put them into different categories, and you can do it that way, you know. So yes, you can. So you could have 5 short ones and 5 markers.
Okay, I'll just skip along here, Annette. We'll just move. Okay, the other thing is just make sure in relation to the timetable of these CAs, just liaise with your programme board, liaise with your head of department. We want to ensure that students aren't getting all CAs or all online assessments all on the same week, the first week after April or whatever. So just be careful around that, and just to check. Okay, so when we look at some of the alternative options, I see a lot of you are putting in some really good examples in the chat, and some of these examples that we've presented in this pack, you may be interested in exploring further as well. So, you know, an alternative to a hard copy assignment submission, you know, alternatives to conducting an oral exam here, you can use Microsoft Teams. What some people are doing is they may have an online open book exam, and they do a random follow-up check with the students. It works well if you have a small group. I know it's difficult with a larger group, where they might just do an oral test to check for their comprehension of that particular challenge or topic, whatever. Sometimes people want to do some sort of a practical interview with students, and that might be the exam, the online exam or online assessment. Alternative to in-class debates, what do we have here? Create an online group discussion task. This is something that's really, really popular, getting students, and they learn so much from feeding into discussion forums and putting topics up. And you can also get students to do a critical essay. So instead of an in-class debate that could have happened, and I know it can be difficult within the Teams environment to do that, perhaps, yes, you can put them into breakout rooms and have a peer assessment criteria sheet set up, but also you can ask them to do a critical essay where they present an argument on a topic and then they submit that. So it's just another alternative. What other alternatives? Online options for dissertations, special projects.
Carina, can I just fire? I just shared. I had a blog post as well on the different assessment practices. A lot of them that you mentioned here. I've just shared it there in the link. And I've also shared a DCU document. I just wanted to do this before we finish, just so that everyone can access it. And basically, it goes through lots of different. It's literally only just released now. The last month, I'd say. It goes through, let's say, science, what they did, the different types they used, video assessment, lots of different innovation ones we mightn't even have thought of yourself, you know. So have a look at that as well.
Did you put that in the chat, Annette?
Yes, I have it in the chat. Yeah, further up. I'll put it in again, but I have it further up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
at the very beginning.
Reflective journals is another thing. If an artifact or evidence is required as part of a reflective assessment, students can point to an e-portfolio or a web page and provide evidence or pictures or audio for that particular art piece and a voiceover to discuss that particular art piece. I know it can be challenging if there's anyone there from the creative arts side looking at alternative approaches and using video. Online simulations, recordings. Remember, all of our assessments, we need to be thinking about accessibility and it's being inclusive and thinking of UDL principles, universal design for learning. And I think Annette made a very good point. If students can't go back or go forward in the MCQ, that could be limiting to some students and could cause awful problems or challenges. So just bear that in mind. I think Mary had asked a question about the sequential side of the MCQ. Annette, I think this is a good example. Did you want to say something about this?
And yes, I can go through that. I was just trying to get as many links up before we
I know.
we finish. I
think the DTU document is in the link there, so we might get to show that.
Yes, so what we found in some people are finding the amount of corrections, they're kind of approaching us from the viewpoint of saying, I have huge classes, how I'm spending so much time correcting, it's very difficult to give good feedback, etc. So one of the points that a lot of people didn't seem to use was the rubric, and there's a session on that separately. So just to note that before I talk here about it, because I use a project rubric in my Moodle when I'm correcting the project. So a lot of people say, I'm doing a 5-credit module and I'm just giving a problem-based approach here, just to continue, just to give a quick example. So again, my structure, and we touched on this a little bit earlier on, we were talking about, changing assessment. So the current structure is 2 assessments worth 50%. And a final exam worth 50%. So again, the result of this, in my particular one, would be 450 assessments to be corrected. Okay, so that's quite a lot of corrections for a 5-credit module, and most of us would have 6 5-credit modules. So that's an awful lot of assessments, So again, what's an alternative to that? So again, I was just giving an example of just one that I was using myself. So 3 assessments. Now, some people are using the OneNote and the notebook. Some people like that. The weekly forum contribution is what I'm using myself. We saw the reflective journal. That's another way of doing it. So number 1 would be a sort of a weekly. Some people do maths questions, a maths problem sheet every week. Some do, if it's English, should be reflective. So whatever, something that's ongoing every week. It's light, but it also allows them to do a little bit of reflective learning. A little bit of a project work. So again, 35% project work, and then I've given a well-structured MCQ for the remainder. Okay, so again, that would be sort of for a 5-credit module. Then you have the weekly, so people are. It's sometimes you can even get it peer reviewed, so people can rate each other. So you can get them to correct it for you, basically. So that's the 15%. The 35% of project, you can use the Moodle, the rubric. I find it brilliant. I have 5 categories and I score them for each one. So again, as I'm correcting the project, I am correcting as I go using the rubric and putting in the feedback. So the assessment, we're talking about cutting down the time for corrections as well. And then the MCQ, really good. Again, as I said already, I do 2 sections. One is the MCQ from a bank where they can't copy. So I've built up a really big bank now at the moment, about 60. I have 60 in my bank and I give 20 in the MCQ. So chances of 2 people getting the same are slim. And it's just, I've been teaching that module for about 4 years. So I've built up quite a good bank of questions. So always get very true results on that based on just the structure of my questions. And my second section then is where I get them to upload. They do out something on a piece of paper for me. They have to do a mind map, and they have to it's just an assignment, so they have to upload something. So that's one thing that shows me that they're able to do it, and they have to type in essay questions as well. Okay, so that's just for a 5 credit. So it's just like a problem-based approach, to give an example. So talking fast there now, but just to give an example of that. So I just wanted to share that. Some people say I'm doing too many corrections, and this is just an example. So instead of me doing 450 assessments to be corrected in one semester, this is a better way of doing it. Okay, so just wanted to share that.
Yeah, just a point there, Annette, just a couple of comments in relation to the rubric. I see, thanks Mary for sharing your rubric example. There's so many examples. I actually run another session that's just on rubrics, looking at rubrics and how we design rubrics. They are critical. It's part of the learning process. If we want our students to succeed and be successful in their program and engage effectively with the assessment, a well-designed rubric would be presented to the students in advance. Why would we keep them in the dark? They need to understand the value of what it is to achieve or highly achieve, or what it means to underachieve. Why would we put students in the dark? We want them to engage with that content and become deep learners and have a really good understanding of what that subject matter is. So it's part of good practice in assessment design and the whole area of assessment literacy with our students, that we give them that opportunity to engage with the rubric and understand. They go away, they attempt that assessment, they do that assessment. We use the rubric to articulate the feedback to them, and we can mark within the rubric as to where they've come down or succeeded and give comments in relation to that. You know, at the end of the day, we want our students to be the very best and perform in the best way they can. So yeah, it's crucial that they get it in advance. And it all comes down to the design aspect of that, which is important. So Annette, do you want to come in?
I just want to finish one, just to say, I meant to say it earlier on, is I ask my students, you know, we have to change the assessment. I've used polls or tell tools, you know, to ask the students to lead their own learning or their assessment strategy. So I asked them, would they prefer, and I think this came up, the students, you know, get annoyed if you're changing, but if you ask their input, they tend to be very much on board. So I asked them, would they prefer to MCQ or project work? So I asked them that, and say 70% said they prefer the MCQ. So we're doing the MCQ now based on the students' response. So they feel that they're leading their own learning. You know, it's like student-centered learning, so again, somebody said that was a bit of an issue. I don't know, was it Joan or, so again, if you ask them, give them the two options you're thinking of and let them decide. And it's a good option as well, you know, so I just wanted to finish off on that, Carina, kind of just to let this.
No, that's great.
Right there, actually.
There's loads being shared there, so there's more in the chat coming through. So, and so what I suggest as a finish point here, because I'm conscious it's 11 o'clock, this resource Annette has shared in the chat, I have it up on the screen there as well. I think it's a nice takeaway from today, because it will give you kind of more in-depth detail into the various different TEL assessments that are available that we've chatted about this morning. So take this document away, and it is actually a live document that colleagues across the sector are feeding into. It's something we want to feed into from GMIT as well, and we're looking at that. So do, by all means, take it away. Also, I wanted to share another link with you in the chat before we go, and it comes back to the digital ed resources on assessment, and there's some really nice academic integrity cases there. I'm just going to put it in the link there so you can go in, and one of the first links that you'll see in there is a link to cases around academic integrity and online assessments, and it was prepared by a university in Sydney, the Sydney University of Technology. So please do have a look at that. There is another link there, the open book, which Sean Daffy put together and in TLO. So end to end tells you how to set up open book with the screenshots and all of that. There's an online assessment guide that we put together before Christmas, and I look at all the different alternatives and considerations. You can look at that. But this session, even this morning on our slides, I think this gives a good overview, doesn't it, Annette? And, you know, it's food for thought for everybody.
Yes, and I think most importantly, there's so many resources here really that, you know, they can really inform your good assessment practice, you know. So, and I think it's great to talk to colleagues, because we're all doing the exact same thing. We're all trying to inform our, you know, we want the best for our students. We want to give a fair assessment to them, and yet we don't want to over-assess them. And that's something we have to be mindful of as well, because people tend to think, oh, I have to give them more now because it's online. So, and again, we all have to be mindful of the situations they're in. One of my students is in Portugal, and I said to her, oh, that's, you know, that's really nice. And she said, well, I'm in a 2-bedroom house and there's 10 of us here. So I just thought, you know, how hard is that for somebody? You know, they're sharing one computer. So, you know, we don't, I suppose we're not aware. So we always have to give options to them as well, time-wise as well, I think, you know, with their assessments. So, so no, it was a great session, and everybody sharing makes it so so much better for everybody on the line. So thanks everybody for sharing. It was really good. And I think the links will all be in the chat anyway afterwards, and you all have access to that.
Yeah, we might have another
more
session.
information.
We'll have another session in March, Annette, that
Yes.
if colleagues come back and share examples and talk through, you know, scenarios, by all means, we'll put it in your
Yes.
schedule. Okay,
Yes, I
so
think-
thanks very much, everybody. Conscious of the time, and everybody probably has classes to go to or more meetings. So thanks a million, and do put anything, if there's any outstanding questions, put them in the chat. We'll be able to respond to them later as well. It'll come through. Okay.
Okay,
Are we
thanks
all right?
everybody. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Hi, Annette. Sorry. Yeah, can I get
Okay, thank
any
you.
link for how you can use the rubric in your Moodle?
Well, what we suggest, Serby, is if you're not familiar with Moodle designing rubrics, book an AMA clinic to meet one of our
Okay.
learning technologists and ask for some guidance on setting up the rubric, because we wouldn't have time to do that in this session.
Yeah. No, that's
All
why I'm
right.
asking the link if you have any link there on your TLO.
Not a link. It's not a link. You'll have to book. That's technical support, design support that you need.
Okay.
Rubric,
Okay.
for a rubric design. Okay. I do a
Thank you.
session separately on rubrics for assessment, but you want to know how to do it in Moodle, do an AMA clinic. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's
Great. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. I'm going to stop the recording now,
Yeah,
Carina, if that's okay. And stop.